thank you to those of you who have joined today's webinar between Uptempo and Reckitt. My name is Jim Williams. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Uptempo. And today we're going to be talking about the business of marketing. That's the best way to describe it. We call it the business of marketing, right? Which is really how to run marketing in a financially responsible way with good budget management, et cetera. And so I'm going to introduce Pablo, or Pablo introduce himself in about 1 second. But first, I got to go through, the usual suspects. So if this is your first ever webinar, congratulations, welcome aboard. The webinar will be recorded, so you can be assured that you'll get a recording sent afterwards, along with slides that we'll send afterwards. We're going to do Q&A. There is a Q&A feature somewhere here in this awesome Zoom interface. We can ask you questions. There's also chat if you want to make some comments or just compliment either of the speakers. We love those. You can use the chat function too. If the question comes in and it's relevant to kind of the part of the conversation we're having, then we'll stop and ask it. Like, try and keep it engaging, interactive as much as possible. But please go ahead and use those features. Before we just get into the meat of the conversation, if you're not familiar with Uptempo, we are enterprise marketing planning software. We like to think of Uptempo as a system of record for marketing planning, which involves strategic planning, campaign planning, and the topic of today's discussion, financial planning or budget management. So we provide that for world's leading enterprises, of which Reckitt is one. We're very excited about as a customer. One other note, Uptempo is a relatively new brand, right? About 3 years ago, we created Uptempo from several companies that came together, one of which is Allocatia, which you might be familiar with. Allocatia does financial management for large enterprises. And so, Pablo, if you say Allocatia because you're so fond of the brand that you've been using for all these years, that's fine. Just know Allocatia is our financial management part of the Uptempo brand. All right, so why don't we get into it here? I will share the screen. I probably put that up earlier, huh, Pablo? Here's our intro slide. Okay, so Pablo, of course, is a finance manager for U.S. marketing governance at Reckitt. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with Reckitt, I'll tell you a little bit about it. First of all, it's a $16 billion consumer products powerhouse. You see Reckitt products every day. Some of the brands you might be familiar with are Lysol, Mucinex, Finish, Durex. It operates in 45 countries. This is amazing. 30 million Reckitt products are sold every single day. So talk about scale of an organization. There's 50,000 employees worldwide. 3,000 of those are marketers. And here in North America and the US, about 100 of those manage their budgets on Uptempo software. And the person who's responsible for making sure that they have all the information they need at their fingertips when they need it is Pablo. So Pablo, why don't you tell us a little bit about your role, a little bit about the size of the budget you manage, and then we'll get into your journey at Reckitt.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Jim, for the introduction. Well, my name is Pablo Gonzalez. As Jim said, I manage the marketing governance team for the US. We have a team of 4 people under my management, and we manage $600 million of media and non-media spend in the US, right? Across the different brands, some of the main ones that Jim mentioned, right? I've been in the company myself for over 6 years now in 2 different markets, started in Canada, doing controllership across the country. And then I was moved here to the US to manage the marketing team, right? The marketing finance and governance team. So that's pretty much about myself. I now live in the big city of New York, enjoying life here. And yeah, as hobbies, I love playing tennis and watching hockey. So let's get going.
Awesome. That's great, Pablo. All right, so let's just jump into it. I kind of called it your journey at Reckitt. It could be Reckitt's journey towards great financial management. From what I understand, managing a $600 million marketing budget can be really, really complicated. And we talked about 100 different budget holders at any given time that are coming to the marketing finance team looking for answers to questions. So can you tell us, or tell me a little bit about when you started kind of your career at Reckitt and maybe what some of the challenges were around managing that budget?
Yeah, I can talk about the actual marketing, finance, governance, end-to-end process to start, so people understand what the challenges are throughout the whole process, right? So as an end-to-end process, when you think about marketing governance, right, you have the first step being understanding and creating your budget, right? Then the next step will be you have a committed spend that you have to through with the vendor. That can be assigned SOW as an example. Once you have that, you can create a purchase order, right? Your campaign goes live, then the vendor submit their invoicing. We have actual spend in this case, let's call it an ERP like SAP. You have financial accruals based on that and balance sheet reconciliations, right? Now, I just gave you like a very high level view of that process. We're going to go into more details on some of the challenges there, but obvious examples of some of the issues that we have with that is that this process need to be followed step by step, right? So obvious examples are that we should not create a PO without an approved budget, as for example. We should not receive an invoice without a PO in place, or we shouldn't be accruing for without committed spend. So those things sound sort of basic, but trust me, in my experience in previous companies, and also with Reckitt before implementing Uptempo, it's common. It's actually quite common. So, and I'm talking about common in large organizations as well,
Yeah.
right? So just to say that not only from a process perspective, but it's also can create a big audit headache as well, having those issues, right, Jim? So.
What, just to dig a little bit deeper here, like we get the slide that shows, all right, you got all these different stages in the process and a lot of arrows flying around with which looks to be icons representing emails and spreadsheets. Are spreadsheets the culprit and the cause of these problems, or the lack of process, or is it some combination of that?
I would say it's a combination, right? It's the fact that it depends on like once you don't have an actual application that can help you from to have that end-to-end process in place and control process, then you have to come with workarounds, right? Creating Excel sheets. As we know, you have marketing teams by brand, they have their own way of working. You have consolidation challenges, right? Then you have like when you're looking back and try to find the source of truth, it's so difficult. Turnarounds happen in every organization, especially in big ones. So just looking back, it's quite challenging, right? So that I think it's a combination of both. Is the fact that you have Excel spreadsheets around and workarounds around a process that is not well documented, or an application that will help you with it, right? So.
And when people do the workarounds and don't follow the process and you don't have that type of governance, what are some of the downstream implications? Overspending, underspending, time waste? Like how does it impact you on the marketing finance side?
Well, I'll say both, right? Like you have a lack of first of all trust in what your information is, right? You don't have that ability to trust the information that you have. The marketers don't know their budgets. They won't know what they launch a campaign and they have all the right information, but they don't know how much actually actualized, right? How much invoices we receive on that. So that's one example, right? Like if you have an application that will tell you, okay, we this is live information that we receive, then they're going to have that visibility and be able to take action, right? I can go, as I said, more details on the end-to-end process and what the challenges are, but overall, it's really tough to control a 600 million budget, and we're talking about around 4,000 campaigns that we have in place. So with 100 plus employees without having some sort of like a centralized and controlled environment, right? So
Okay. Yeah, totally. And let's dig into it. But before we go in, I'm curious with the audience that we have, if any of these issues like resonate. And we have a poll, which I think Alice can help me do. A poll here to ask the audience whether or not you're experiencing regular challenges around financial management and budget management. So just take a second here and tell me, what's your biggest financial headache as either a marketer or someone on the finance side? And it looks like we can't vote, Pablo, so give it 1 minute here and then you can run the live poll. All right. Still have the poll questions up. I don't know if the poll answer came up or no. I didn't see any poll results. There it is. Thank you. All right. So biggest financial headache. So it looks like improving trust between marketing and finance on budget management seems to be the lead with 46 responses, 46% rather. Simplifying the month-end close process and reducing hours spent reconciliating marketing and finance budgets numbers. Okay, so it's a common problem. We hear this all the time when we talk to customers, that these are persistent challenges that come up over and over again. And a lot of it has to do with that lack of process, but also no system of record that can give marketers the kind of visibility they need. So let's jump into kind of next part of this is dig a little deeper into some of these challenges, right? We call this the cost of broken processes. Pablo, can you tell us a little bit about how this played out at Reckitt?
Yeah, exactly. So going into detail of the process that I explained, the end-to-end process, it's going to actually help understanding the same challenges that probably some of the people here on the call are having, right? So when we're talking about setting up budgets and understanding budgets, right? Marketing teams, as I said, are by brand. They create their own Excel files, their own budgets. This causes, first of all, consolidation headaches, right? So we as finance, we need to consolidate and provide one view by company, not by brand. As for understanding the budget, when you have a budget in place, a campaign in place, and you don't have proper documentation without clear audit trail, then people don't understand what happened in the past. We are talking about turnovers and things like that, audit pieces, right? That you go back and understand how what triggered this campaign to happen, and you don't have an audit trail in place. Now, when we're looking at spend limits by brand, right, and committed spend with the vendor, in many cases, the marketers, as I said before, are not really aware of what's available to spend for their brand because they don't have visibility of the actuals, right? They don't understand what comes through, what they can use and what they cannot use. PO setups. If there's no budget controls, right? You can create POs without a budget in place. So that can be a problem. And back to your point, Jim, that can create an overspend or an overspend in many cases, right? Financial accrual and processes invoices, an example. The challenges are not only for time spent, but also the accuracy, right? If we depend on Excel spreadsheet for a proof of spend forecast, and there's no interface between your application and your ERP, how do you ensure that your accrual is correct, right? Like you depend on analysts, a team of human beings to actually give you what they think it is based on reports, right? So I think that's one of the challenges. And in the end, balance sheet reconciliations, as an example, we have manual process causing mistakes and time wasted, right? Again, you have thousands of campaigns. You have $600 million budget. So that's quite significant. And from an audit perspective, they normally challenge me in the past on what is the source of truth, right? Where in having an application like Uptempo, which we're going to go more in details on the solution, right? Will actually give you that, right? And in the end, it's just providing an actual proper aging of each campaign. And when I'm talking about aging, is meaning when it was launched, what are the actuals behind it, what is the accrual against that, right? And understanding if it's valid or not. It's a huge part of our business, right? So I would say that that's pretty much in details what the challenges we have, right? So
If you look at this slide, Pablo, is there ones that pop out as being more problematic? Like if you were to rank these in terms of how big a headache they are, is it more on the analytics side? Is it the fact you don't get the visibility to spend, or they all kind of contribute to one another, like in your?
yeah, I would say like all of them, because if you think about it, they're all like related, right? Because yes, spreadsheet chaos try actually is related to a manual process delay in everything. With that, you're going to have a fragmented financial view, as an example. And with you combine all of those, you're going to have dead ends for analytics perspective and black box spending, right? So I do think all of them really summarize the challenges that we have, right? On a budget like we do. So
Yeah, I'll ask one other question too, because you and we had a conversation about this. The topic of confidence, right? This idea of having confidence. Marketers having confidence in the data they're being given so they can run their campaigns and get the most for every dollar. But just as important or even more important, like the finance teams, maybe the CFO, having confidence that marketing is a good steward of company resources. Like, how much does that confidence play into the relationship between marketing and finance, or even your day-to-day operations?
well, that's a good question. So in the past, again, before the solution, the question will always come from the business saying, it can be a question of like, how much have you spent on this brand and this non-media activity, right? People will have to go into a spreadsheet and not having the answer right away. You'll have to come to three different analysts to ask the question. They come up with their own spreadsheet and calculation to come with that. Senior management, first of all, they want an answer right away, and they want a yes or no. This is the amount, right? And the fact that we provide confidence. I can tell you, and again, we're going to go in more details on the solution. Now we do have the confidence of this is the information that we have because of the things that we're going to cover later. But what I'm saying is that confidence, it really seems like it's not a lot. It is really significantly important, especially when management needs to understand and needs to trust that. And we also talk about reinvestment, right? Once you have a visibility of what your actual spend is, you can make business decisions for the good of your brands, right? So that it's actually uh, it's a key part of the solution in this case. So.
All right. Well, let's talk about that solution. Uh, you know, I throw this number out there, $600 million in marketing spend. And that's just a number that, to me, it just blows me away. A lot of money to be spent on marketing, and you're overseeing it, right? I would imagine that would keep many finance leaders up at night worrying about that spend. 1% miss is 6 million. I'm not a great math guy, but that's a lot of money we're talking about here. So, and you're doing it with a pretty lean team, from what I understand. Can you now just walk us through what is the solution you put in place that you've referenced a couple of times, and how do you operate off of that today?
Of course, as we just spoke like about the problems that I have encountered, we all probably have encountered in the past, right? So the company in North America, we implemented Uptempo back in 2020, um, and I'm going to go in an overview of the process and what we have gained so far. Overall, now we have step by step dependencies and interface between the ERP and Uptempo. When I say dependencies, I talk about step one to like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now instead of having a PO in place or an invoice already being processed without a PO, that's not possible anymore. Now we have created dependencies, end-to-end dependencies. I'm going to mention that as number one because it's quite important, right? So the first step will be budgets, right? We now have a budget being managed by the marketing finance team. And this is going through the whole budget process, which is approved top line budget, right? You cannot, and the next step will be entering a campaign in the application. You cannot enter a campaign in the application if you don't have a budget in place, right? So you cannot engage. You shouldn't engage the vendor if you know you don't have a campaign being done, right? Now, the marketer is responsible now to go into Uptempo application and enter a campaign. That campaign can be entered, but it has to be approved. So we do have three big pillars of approvals. We have marketing finance, which manage the budgets. We have controls and governance, which make sure that the period is correct, that procurement has been involved in the purchasing, and then the SOWs in this example it's actually compliant, right? And then you have a final approval based on a GOA, which is granted of authority in place, right? So at that point, you have a budget in place, you have a whole process to approve a campaign in place, right? Once this program is approved in the application, it generates an internal order. This is a key part of the process because that interfaces with the ERP. In my case here for Reckitt, it's called SAP, right? Now, if you don't have that marketing internal order, which comes from all the process that I explained on the approval of the campaign itself, then you cannot create a purchase order, right? And a vendor ideally should not go in business without a purchase order, right? So now you have created all those. So as I said, going back to dependencies, right? You cannot create a PO without an IO. You cannot have an IO without an approval piece in Uptempo in this case, right? Now we launch the program, and then we can talk about financial accruals, right? Uptempo generates an automated accrual based on one, approved campaigns to date, which are being offset by spend in SAP. Now, spend in SAP is so important because any invoice process against that approved PO will talk back to Allocadia. So that goes back to having the visibility for a marketer, how much money they have available for each of the campaigns, right? Because it's live data, really. It's an approved forecast, approved campaign offset by your invoices process, right? So, and then in the end, you have insight reporting, where you can report on aging reports by campaign that we talk about, non-compliance report, meaning like if you have an approved order, you don't have a PO in place, it will flag that. If you have campaigns that you have entered but hasn't been approved by, it can be my team from a governance perspective or final approval, it will tell you. So overall, it's really a great solution that we've been having with that, right? And this is all managed again by a team of really 5 individuals, including myself, right?
5 individuals manage this whole process for that size of the budget.
Exactly. And now we have like 90% of our time really spending on analysis, and compliance, which is so important in such a large corporation, and also we're publicly traded, right? So it's you need to have those controls in place, right? So
90% on analysis versus
10% of creating, exporting data and doing things,
answering questions about reconciliation and spreadsheets and trying to get to the number and the source of truth and all of that other stuff.
Exactly.
Has there been a significant decrease in the time of marketing teams coming to you or marketing budget holders coming to you and trying to understand exactly what's left? Is you get far fewer of those inquiries because they just get it?
Oh, all the time. Yeah. It's very different. They have the visibility, right? So we still business partner, as you can imagine, but it's a very different, everything is in front of us, basically. Yep. There's no analyst doing things in the background and try to give us a number. That doesn't exist anymore. So
got it. So you provided a couple examples. You talked about, so when you talk about 90% of your time done on reporting and analysis to get to get questions answered, and you talked a little bit this notion of aging. Can you walk me through a little bit about that specific example? What is the impact of aging on your spend management, and what kind of answers do you get from that, or what types of savings or better reinvestment of dollars elsewhere? Can you tell me how that works?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Back to the point, we have real-time visibility by campaign, right? And when I'm talking about the aging, it will tell us it will tell us what is sitting in our balance sheet. And in the end, balance sheet is a financial statement, right? I can talk about one recent example that comes to my mind is that before Q4 2024, a temporary reflection of a media cashback complaint that we have in place between August and September. I talk about the insights report, which will give us a non-compliance, right? That non-compliance report reflected on US dollar value, in real time, which really allowed us to reinvest over $1.5 million in Mucinex in December. Mucinex being good for cold and flu, that came handy, right? And if as a public traded company, if you don't invest that money in year, you lose it, right? So that's one example that comes to my mind. Now that's from reinvesting, having that live data, and then you can actually take actions from a business perspective. But I can talk about the overall controls that we have in place, right? Like end-to-end controls. It is totally audit proof. We have passed audits in 2020, right? So
interesting. Very good. So moving on, I think this is great. The impact of results really obvious. I think maybe what might make sense is go to just Q&A. I have not been focused on the Q&A feature here, but let me check it and see if there are any questions come in here. I'll stop sharing for 1 second. Come back to that. All right, a couple Q&A. Do we have a couple of questions in here, which is interesting. So just a reminder, if you have any questions you want to ask Pablo about the processes he's gone through, just use the Q&A feature in the interface and we will get to them. And I'll also remind you that if you want to hang around after the Q&A, Jan on the Uptempo team is going to spend like 10 minutes walking through what Uptempo is, what it looks like. Quick demonstration if you're interested in that. So the first question we have here, Pablo, is looking ahead, how do you see Reckitt's budget management approach evolving over the next few years based on what you've been able to accomplish so far?
Well, I think the evolution of the budgets is the fact that the communication and the information that now, again, there's been improvements that has happened since the implementation, right? So we now have interface creating POs as an example from a campaign. We have controls in place that we didn't have in 2020. So all of that has improved from the implementation from 2020 to 2025 now, where we are, right? That creates confidence on the finance, let's say, team, right? And the team itself. So I think that kind of confidence, understanding the process, understanding that when we provide a figure, they understand that that's real. We now have implemented 2 meetings a month with the senior leadership team where we say, this is what you can use. This is what, and they know what to expect. So I do think like the way we budget things in a more controlled environment, it really gives not only the confidence, but the decision making in year. So I do think that improved environment, more controlled environment will actually make the budget process much better. Again, you have a process that you set up a budget for a year, but that changes, especially in a public traded company, right? You have the way that you perform, the way the business is performing. You have several forecasts in year that will really change the shape of your P&L in this case, right? So,
okay, that's good. That's a good overview there. There's another question here, which I think is a good one. So there's a lot of marketers and marketing finance folks out there that are struggling with the level of visibility that you guys have seemed to have solved here. What advice would you give another enterprise organization that's having those challenges? You know, you've been on this journey for some time. What's the best way to start that journey? You know, like any advice you might have?
I do think it's looking at the first step. If I jump into an organization, a large organization, and the marketing team is having problems like with visibility, with controls, I'll go into draw a process in place, what the process are, and then look for a solution. Again, I don't want to talk specific names, but a solution that will give you that end-to-end process that I described, and control environment, and also in the partnership with the finance team. I do think in many cases, in my experience, there's a gap between marketers and finance, right? Finance people talk their language, marketing people talk their language. So I think it's good to actually have those communications in place, see what the needs are from the business, from a finance perspective as well, and and speak the same language. And I think that's one of the main things that you can do. Sounds a bit like a bit basic in a way, like let's speak the same language, but really it means a lot, because every time you have these like finance people going to marketers and they don't know what's going on, right? So it's just getting in the same page, and looking at the process end to end, and make sure that that's right. So
Yeah, I mean, I think you pretty much answered this question. We had another one from the audience. It's pretty similar, which is like, how do you get marketing and finance teams aligned around the system or process? Did you have any tips that you had around change management? Like, literally, is there some bit of like cultural alignment that needs to happen
yeah,
before you get into the process stuff? You know, you guys
in
could still
the
have beers and pizza for a couple times. Like,
in the end, we should all like have we all have the same objective. Let's be honest, we all have the same objective, right? Now, you can talk about finance. From the finance is want to make sure that the right brand equity investment is in place, and I would say marketing as well. Then you have the control team that want to make sure that you do that in a controlled environment and you're compliant with your spend, right? So it's finding that really that middle ground, right? And say, okay, we need the controls in place, we need compliance, but we also need to achieve our we call it like operating profit, right? But marketing wants to invest in their brands, and they want to like grow sales, right? So I think we all in the end want the same thing, and it's making understanding why there's a controls need for X, Y, and Z. Why do you need a signed SOW based on the limit that you have, right? So I do think, based on my experience, there's been a lot of like lack of communication between departments, right? And I want to say that's the first thing, because you can see, if I'm the controller, I'll say, "Hey, Jim, I need you to sign these," but I'll never explain why. I'll never say, "Hey, this is why. This is the policy in place. We're not gonna." So I do think like it's more like enforcing marketers to do X, Y, and Z without explaining the why. That communication is extremely important, in my opinion. So
that's a really good point. We had some other questions here about how to get started with that, but I think you've done a pretty good job of answering that, or at least given some tips on how to get started. There was another question in here, which is, what we've talked about so far is North America, a system that governs North America. Obviously, Reckitt is a worldwide global company or whatever. Is there anything you would change on your implementation that you went through in North America, as if you as band elsewhere, might have learned along the way?
yeah, I do think like North America in this case, especially the US, is the best in the business from Reckitt, talking about controls and processes, and Uptempo being, of course, one of the goal to go to, right? I had conversations with the global team, several of them actually, because they know this is the best in the business, right? Globally. With that said, when I look back, I think there's so many lessons learned. I want to say, from a controls perspective, from a supporting perspective. I had a Locadia in Canada, which is set up differently than the US because of the size of the business, right?
Yeah.
I do think that no matter the size of the business, I'll implement the same way, the same controls, the same process across every single business, even if you're like, especially the size, right? I know Canada being a smaller country, as an example, they think, no, I can just use it for this purpose that I need. Once you have a process, even if you're a smaller business, it really pays off. So my recommendation, if I go to global, be like, even if you go to a smaller market, implement this process, implement these controls, because it's gonna pay off, and it's gonna actually, really, really leverage the solution of Uptempo, and that would be my first recommendation, right? So
Very good. That's very helpful. Pablo, this has been excellent. I really appreciate your going into all the details, sharing the highs and lows of your journey,
Yeah.
your expertise. Again, for anybody that's on today's call, we'll of course send out some slides and the recording of this afterwards, so you can share it with your finance colleagues or marketing colleagues, as the case may be. We're gonna stop here, and then I think I'm gonna invite Jan to share a little bit about what Uptempo is, so he can walk through that, give you a little more context into the system that Pablo's been referencing. Before I do that, there's a couple things just on this final slide I wanted to talk to, which is the first is, you know, marketing planning can be very complex and very complicated, involve a lot of people, not just budget planning, but actual campaign planning, strategic planning. If you're looking for something to boil it down into 7 simple steps, I would encourage you to check out our blueprint on marketing planning. That's the QR code. You can find it on our website as well. 7 steps to marketing planning. It's been a hit over the last year. And then finally, I am looking forward to getting out into the field a little bit over the next quarter or two. Uptempo will be at these events. We've listed Adobe Summit, Forrester, ShopTalk, and then eventually the Gartner Symposium event in June. If you go to any of these, please come say hello, stop by. It's always better to meet in person than virtually. So with that, Pablo, thank you very much. I appreciate your presentation, all your insights and wisdom. And I'm going to turn it over to Jan. Maybe Jan, walk us through a little bit about Uptempo.
Thank you, Jim. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Awesome. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Pablo. That was awesome. G'day, everyone. We're going to spend a couple of minutes here just diving into the background, the foundation of the solution that Pablo and Reckitt have been leveraging, and that is known as Uptempo Spend. Now, before I even get into the solution, I want everyone to kind of think about how budgets are managed within their respective organizations. And 99 times out of 100, it's going to be a response of some sort of Excel, SharePoint, Google Sheets. And there are different brands around the world. There are different marketing budgets around the world. And they're all collectively looking to effectively manage their budget and understand exactly how they're spending at any point in the year so that they can be good stewards of the dollar. What we're going to look at is, instead of living within a world of spreadsheets and SharePoints and disconnected tools, what does it mean to have access to an online budgeting, planning, and investment tracking solution? And that's what we can see on screen now. Imagine instead being able to log into a sort of top-down dashboard where you have immediate visibility into either your brand, your whole marketing organization, your channel, whatever it is that you manage, knowing exactly what is my allocated budget, what have I agreed with finance that we are going to be spending, and at any point in the year, having clear visibility into exactly what are we forecasting for the remainder of the year. What have we got caught up in current commitments, and what have we actually already spent? Having visibility into the dollars that sit within finance, as well as the forecast that marketing manage, to know at any point in time exactly where you're likely to land against that agreed upon number. Imagine being able to break down that spend in any which way you need to. Maybe you want to see by brand category, by your specific brand. Perhaps you want to see that spend, what was planned to be spent by a specific channel, and what are we actually on track to spend within that channel. All of this live visibility, simply because getting budget owners, budget coordinators, brand owners, whoever it is, out of those spreadsheets and instead into online workspaces. We call these investment plans. Looks a bit like a spreadsheet because it's meant to. The whole idea here is that now, as a budget owner, I have clear visibility into any budget that's been allocated to me. And instead of a spreadsheet, I have a simple workspace where I can now start planning out the various things that I need to spend money on. Now, this workspace, unlike a spreadsheet, it actually lives within a standardized environment. In this case, I'm looking at a North American team budget. That North American budget lives specifically within a centralized hierarchy. These hierarchies look so different for every one of our customers. If you think about a consumer goods organization, we're more likely broken down into regions and then brand categories that then nest the brands themselves. Every business is unique, but the whole concept is a hierarchy is developed that matches how budgets are allocated throughout your organization so that there are no more spreadsheets, so that we can manage multiple currencies, user access, user permissions. We can give leadership roll up visibility by this hierarchy. That's the underlying concept of up-tempo spend. Now, with teams working in these online investment plans, they're going to have a lot of additional efficiencies. The ability to tag the various things that are important to them, working versus non-working spend, channel, suppliers, target audiences, every element of spend can be tagged appropriately so that brand managers, CMOs, marketing leaders can have that breakdown of every dollar by the dimensions that matter to them. Above and beyond this, within these workspaces, just like Pablo discussed, there is tight integrations, tight alignment with the financial systems of record, so that we're not just looking at forecasting dollars, but I can actually switch my view and get immediate visibility into what money has been committed, what money has actually been spent. All of this data flowing in from tools like Coupa, NetSuite, SAP, Oracle, whatever is being leveraged by finance within an organization, simple data transfers ensure that up-tempo workspaces are always reflecting committed spend and actual spend so that budget owners and budget coordinators have live visibility into exactly what money they have left to work with, and they have a simpler online workspace to manage out their forecasts. Within this workspace, having visibility into my budget, having the controls to gain approvals, having the ability to tag everything by the dimensions that matter to me is the simple underpinning that then provides automated reporting for leadership, for budget owners, for whoever needs it. Here, I can see a breakdown. Show me my working versus non-working spend. Of my working spend, show me the various categories. All of this automatically fed and live because of the way we're pulling data from financial systems of record. Other very important views we'll see. I'm a manager like Pablo, and I need to track the various brands within my budget. Well, here I have a very quick view into who are my golden children. Here are my 3 brands that have all perfectly planned out and forecasted their budgets. However, EcoBoost, something's going on here. I can clearly and very quickly see that they're over forecasting their spend based on their budget target. Sometimes I want to see this more visually. I want to see in red what are my budget targets and the various budgets that I manage, who's forecasting below those, who's going over. All information available automatically via a dashboard. Different views where I can compare one brand to another and see who's on track and who's not. Comparing, in this case, their forecasted spend versus their actual spend. And the actual spend being everything that is hitting the books in the ERP system of record. Finally, sometimes it's not just about having snapshot points in time. We want to be able to run analysis as marketers. I want to see trends over time. Well, the beauty of up-tempo spend is that since it's eliminated spreadsheets, and this is where my budget owners and coordinators and brand managers actually work, we're collecting data over time, and we can start to see trends over time. I want to see how my plan or my forecasts over the last 2 fiscal periods compares to how we've actually raised POs, to how we've seen actuals flowing into the system. All of these data points stored within databases within the solution so that you can start to run historical analysis on all marketing spend. With this visibility, we want to give teams the ability to move money around. How are we shifting money from one cost center to another throughout the year? Very quickly, I have a summary here that shows me our digital media group, they've transferred away 100,000 from their original budget. But our Eastern European field marketing team have actually gained 500,000 to their original budget. A very quick snapshot that shows me how money is moving between brands or between teams within our marketing organization. So far, we've really focused on up-tempo spend. Up-tempo, however, also does have the ability to help teams manage their various marketing campaign plans. Here I see along the top a simple marketing calendar, and on the left, my marketing campaign framework, showing me exactly what is in market when in a very interactive and engaging way. I can start to engage and understand, why is this in market? What audiences are we going after with this specific activity? So here, up-tempo plan, more specifically focused on why we're putting marketing activities into in front of our audiences. Managing the money of marketing whilst also managing the purpose of marketing. Why are we doing things, targeting audiences with certain activities? That was a good little sneak peek into up-tempo. If there are more questions, feel free to reach out, but hopefully this has been an insightful way to see how Pablo and Reckitt are leveraging up-tempo spend to manage their marketing dollars like a business.
Thank you, Jan. Really, really good overview. Thank you. I know it's hard to show off an enterprise planning platform in 10 minutes left. You did an admirable job. I appreciate it. Okay, that brings us to the end of our presentation today. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Pablo from Reckitt and the great things he's doing there to manage a whole lot of money, and enjoyed the demo overview. If you have any questions, of course, you can reach out to us, follow us on LinkedIn, etc. Come see us at the events we talked about. I encourage you to download the blueprint and check that out. And we'll be in touch with the recording from today's presentation. Thank you, Pablo.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jim.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye.